Hello, I'm back. I said I was going to be back on Monday, and as it turns out, I am back on Monday. It's just a week later. I was surprised to learn just how exhausting it is to be a professor at Zoom University, and I'm sure my students would tell you that it is equally, if not more exhausting, to be a student at Zoom University. But I am a woman of my word, so I'm back to talk a little bit about this nutty book that we all finished, that we read together. And also then to talk about what we might read next. So I think I mentioned in the last video maybe that there is a translator's note that's super interesting. And the translator, Lisa Dillman, says a couple things that I just wanted to share. She talks about how she prepared to do this translation and that she was reading Alice in Wonderland and Aztec mythology and Dante and Cormac McCarthy, which I find an interesting list. But she also has this to say about one of the words that recurs in the text that I just wanted to share with you. She writes, "Unsurprisingly, I also spent a tremendous amount of time considering possibilities for the novel's most talked about neologism, yarchar, or yachar, I guess. Yuri himself has discussed this verb in multiple places. Within signs, it means essentially to leave. The word is derived from yarchas, from the Arabic karja, meaning exit, which were short Mozarabic verses or couplets tacked on to the end of longer Arabic or Hebrew poems written in Al-Andalus, the region we now call Spain. Written in the vernacular, these lyric compositions served as a sort of bridge between cultures and languages. Mozarabic being a kind of hybrid that was, of course, not yet Spanish. And on one level, Signs is just that, a book about bridging cultures and languages. Yarchar, too, is a noun turned verb. I wrangled with myself and spoke somewhat obsessively with others over how best to render this term, debating multiple options before deciding on to verse. The two runners-up were to port and to twain. Used in context, it is easily understood and has the added benefits of also being a noun turned verb, a term clearly referring to poetry, and part of several verbs involving motion and communication, traverse, reverse, converse, as well as the end of the universe. Makina, the protagonist, is the character who most often verses, as well as the woman who serves as a bridge between cultures, languages, and worlds. Would readers realize any of this had it not just been explained? I doubt it, but that's okay. The same is true of the Spanish. Opening with a sinkhole large enough to kill people and closing with another subterranean sequence, the book takes us full circle in a variety of ways. So I thought that was a really smart explanation and interesting, right, in the way that the translator was looking for a word that does the work of both language and poetics and space and culture, which the book is trying to do in this very short space. And it seemed like most of you liked it. I really liked it too. It's a kind of haunting, spare, interesting book. And I think it's pretty interesting on gender, right? You have a male author rendering this compelling female protagonist. And on the one hand, maybe it's problematic, right? Because you have this girl who kind of outwits the men and is the bridger of cultures, and there are things about that that might re-entrench some things about gender. But I also found the way that she was depicted in relation to the men, especially Mr. H and Mr. W at the beginning, quite striking. And yeah, I found the ending, I guess, strangest of all. It just felt so sudden, and I guess that subterranean space she enters into to sort of assume a new identity is very allegorical, but it's what it would feel like to surrender one's old identity and become a brand new person in a new culture, in a new language, as it were, that in some way it is the end of a universe, maybe your universe. But I don't know, just some random thoughts from your English professor friend here. Obviously, you should let me know or post below if you have more to say or anything in response. But the next thing is an exciting one, which is if you want to keep listening, what we should read next. So I have 3 books that I thought we could choose from. You can let me know in person, well, not in person because I won't see you, but on text or an email or in class, or you can just post a comment below. So I'll go from shortest to longest. So the first book is The Emissary by Yoko Tawada, who is a Japanese writer who lives in Berlin and writes in both Japanese and German. And this is a translation. It won the National Book Award. And I'll just read the description. Yoko Tawada's new novel, The Emissary, is a breathtakingly lighthearted meditation on mortality. You see there's a theme with the books I'm picking, apparently. After suffering a massive, irreparable disaster, Japan cuts itself off from the world. Children are born so weak they can barely walk. The only people with any get up and go are the elderly. Mumai lives with his always worried great-grandfather, Yoshiro, and they carry on a day-to-day routine in what could be viewed as a post-Fukushima time. Mumai may be frail and gray-haired, but he is full of hope, full of wit, and free of self-pity. Deftly turning inside out the dystopian scenario, Yoko Tawada creates an irrepressibly funny, playfully joyous novel with a legerdemain uniquely her own. I've read one of her books before. It was really weird and witty and funny, and it's, as you can see, pretty short. All right, so that's option 1, The Emissary. Option 2, I had recommended to me by my good friend Nina, who is a book editor who lives in Berlin. And so this is a novel also in translation. You can see it's a little longer, although the margins are pretty big and there are some short pages. But it would take us longer. So this is called Before the Feast. Here's the description. It's the evening before the feast in the village of Furstenfeld, population an odd number. The village is asleep, except for the ferryman. He's dead. And Mrs. Krantz, the night-blind painter who wants to depict her village for the first time at night. A bell ringer and his apprentice want to ring the bells. The only problem is that the bells have gone. A vixen is looking for eggs for her young, and Mr. Schramm is discovering more reasons to quit life than to quit smoking. Someone has opened the doors to the village archive, but what drives the sleepless out of their houses is not that which was stolen, but that which has escaped. Old stories, myths, and fairy tales are wandering about the streets with the people. They come together in a novel about a long night, a mosaic of village life, in which the long-established and newcomers, the dead and the living, craftsmen, pensioners, and noble robbers in football jerseys bump into one another. They all want to bring something to a close on this night before the feast. And she said that this was a terrific novel, and I trust her. So this is a longer one, Before the Feast, option 2. And here comes option 3 by Nicole Krauss, who is an American writer who has published a couple novels. I think she's a very beautiful writer, so I think it might be a good book to read aloud. This particular book is from 2017. It's called Forest Dark. And the summary goes like this. Jules Epstein, a man whose drive, avidity, and outsized personality have, for 68 years, been a force to be reckoned with, is undergoing a metamorphosis. In the wake of his parents' death, his divorce from his wife of more than 30 years, and his retirement from the New York law firm where he was a partner, he has felt an irresistible need to give away his possessions, alarming his children and perplexing the executor of his estate. With the last of his wealth, he travels to Israel with a nebulous plan to do something to honor his parents. In Tel Aviv, he is sidetracked by a charismatic American rabbi planning a reunion for the descendants of King David, who insists that Epstein, right? Problematic name now, but not that Epstein. That this Epstein, Jules Epstein, is part of that storied dynastic line. He also meets the rabbi's beautiful daughter, who convinces Epstein to become involved in her own project, a film about the life of David that is being shot in the desert with life-changing consequences. But Epstein isn't the only seeker embarking on a metaphysical journey that dissolves his sense of self, place, and history. Leaving her family in Brooklyn, a well-known young novelist arrives at the Tel Aviv Hilton, where she has stayed every year since her birth. Troubled by writer's block and a failing marriage, she hopes that the hotel can unlock a dimension of reality and her own perception of life that has been closed off to her. But when she meets a retired literature professor who proposes a project she can't turn down, she is drawn into a mystery that alters her life in ways she could have never imagined. So that's a pretty heavy description, right, about like divorce and rabbis and all this. But I've actually heard her read aloud, and like I said, read aloud from this book. It seems quite great, but this might only appeal to the 40 and over set. So again, that's called Forest Dark. So we have option 1, The Emissary by Yoko Tawada. 2, Before the Feast by, oh gosh, I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce that properly, Sasha Stanishik. And Forest Dark by Nicole Krauss. So cast your votes, and most importantly, take care of yourself. Be safe, be well, know that I miss you, and I'm looking forward to hearing which book you'd like to read. Bye.